जम्मू कश्मीर जीएसटी के साथ इंटीग्रेट हुआ, ये जम्मू कश्मीर के लिए भी और देश के लिए भी एक सकारात्मक कदम है। जम्मू कश्मीर के जीएसटी में इंटीग्रेट होने से सच में जो पूरे देश के इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन की टैक्स की दृष्टि से कल्पना थी वो इसमें पूरी हुई है। मैं इतना ही कहूंगा कि जो विषय एक दो सदस्यों ने उठाया कि क्या ये उनके स्पेशल स्टेटस को इन्फ्रिंज करता है, कांग्रेस पार्टी के सदस्यों ने उठाया, मुझे नहीं लगता कि एक राष्ट्रीय राजनीतिक दल को इस विषय में उलझना चाहिए था। मैंने पहले भी कहा कि इन द स्टेट ऑफ J&K, this was an argument conventionally given by the separatists. And the argument was that this will lead to greater integration with India. So don't go in for GST. And conventionally, it was the PDP-BJP government which was strongly advocating it. The finance minister there belongs to the PDP, he's an economist. And I had also expected the Congress and the National Conference to support this. In fact, when I first became the finance minister, it was the National Conference leader who was the chairman of the Empowered Committee of Finance Ministers, who was advocating the GST. Subsequently, they took a different position. And I will only say, without getting into this whole controversy of special status, the comment of which was made in the assembly there when this issue was raised, that the special status was never intended to create the economic impediments for the state. That the state must economically progress in the larger interest of its people. This can never go contrary to the special status itself. And therefore, the whole argument of special status getting diluted because economic integration of the state takes place in terms of taxation is not a fair argument to give. और जैसा मैंने आरंभ में कहा कि अगर मान लीजिए J&K इंटीग्रेट न करती तो वहां के कंज्यूमर्स को इनपुट क्रेडिट नहीं मिलता, वहां की ट्रेड को नहीं मिलता, हर प्रोडक्ट महंगा होता। पठानकोट में कार सस्ती होती, जम्मू और श्रीनगर में महंगी होती। पठानकोट में रेफ्रिजरेटर या टेलीविजन सेट सस्ता होता, जम्मू और श्रीनगर में महंगा होता। और वहां के ट्रेडर को बाईपास करके वहां का कंज्यूमर पठानकोट से वो सामान खरीद कर लेकर जाता। इससे उनके कंज्यूमर को भी तकलीफ आती, इससे उनके ट्रेडर को भी तकलीफ आती और स्टेट का भी रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन कम होता अपने आप में। और इसलिए ये कदम एक कंज्यूमिंग स्टेट्स के जोड़ने से साथ में उसको लाभ हुआ है। कई प्रश्न उठाए गए और कई बार हम लोग कुछ प्रचार पढ़ते हैं तो इसलिए उसको सच मान लेते हैं। सतपति जी ने उठाया GSTN, some people have been canvassing on GSTN. Now I explained yesterday that GSTN has a massive job to perform. It has to register lakhs and lakhs of people. It has then to evolve a system which will receive literally billions of vouchers and then match 320 crore vouchers every month. Keep an eye on every transaction in the country. और जैसे ही आपने उठाया तो खड़गे जी का स्वभाव है, उन्होंने कहा हाँ बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं। कई बार खड़गे जी सेल्फ गोल स्कोर कर लेते हैं, और इसलिए कि जीएसटीएन का ये जो ढांचा था, जीएसटीएन का जो ये ढांचा था वो यूपीए सरकार ने बनाया, और मेरे ऊपर दबाव था कि उसको बदलो. द प्रेशर ऑन मी वाज दे हैव मेड इट, इट्स अ फॉल्टी structure and you must change it. I took a position that what the UPA government did was a correct structure and I will not change it. And I was surprised when Mr. Khadke started agreeing with you. Now, why was it a correct structure? It was a correct structure because 24%, about 25-24% of the shares belong to the central government. Equal amount belongs to the state governments collectively. So center and state governments own 49% approximately. So the company is technically not a government company. If it was a government company, then for the purpose of employment of staff, the IT experts, their salary structures and grades, you would have had to pay them the government structures. And to manage an operation of this magnitude, probably the UPA government then in power thought it was not possible to get the best minds in the world to start working on such a structure if you are to just pay them a director or a joint secretary salary. So they created a structure which was technically not a government company. But who did they give the 51% share to? To HDFC, to National Stock Exchange, to LIC Housing, credible organizations, with a condition that we can take over those shares and increase our own shareholding to 51% if necessary. We did not consider it necessary. The board will have a government majority. The executives will be appointed by the government. And a positive, for any decision to be taken, a government's positive vote is required. So no decision can be taken without the consent of the government nominee. And then, when we came to power, I just added one more thing, that GSTN will also be subjected to CAG audit. So we made this correction. And therefore, the present structure that has been evolved, it was formed at that time, it has evolved now. It's a structure which is working so far well. There have not been major glitches. There could be, but then those glitches are always corrected. There is no such technology in the world which doesn't have glitches. The moment an examination result comes out, and young students of class 11, 10 or 12 go to the software to find out their marks, there are glitches even then. कि सिस्टम फेल हो गया, थोड़ी देर बाद ठीक करके वो लाते हैं. तो इसलिए जीएसटीएन को बार बार इशू बनाते रहना और उसमें कोई सरकार की तरफ से काफी उस पर कड़ी नजर अपने आप में रखी जा रही है. अब कुछ और तर्क नहीं मिला तो हर आदमी स्लैब बहुत ज्यादा है, मैं मानता हूं स्लैब ज्यादा है, बट देन डोंट एड्रेस कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी आर्ग्यूमेंट्स. You will say there are too many slabs and it must also contain inflation. The two are directly related. Now, assuming instead of 12% and 18% we had only one slab, let us assume, and let me for a moment demolish this argument of multiple slabs. It's an argument against the poor people in this country. It's an argument in favor of the wealthy and the rich. Supposing there was only one slab, as some people in columns have said, and we had said everything will be taxed only at 15%. Then a Hawaii chappal would have been taxed at 15%, a BMW car would have been taxed at 15%. So those who are advocating a single tax have learnt from some Western society where there is no population which is BPL. Please remember that an indirect tax is a regressive tax. The rich man and the poor man pay the same amount of tax. जब गरीब आदमी साबुन खरीदता है या अमीर आदमी खरीदता है, उन पर टैक्स उतना ही लगता है। इनकम टैक्स प्रोग्रेसिव होता है क्योंकि अमीर आदमी ज्यादा देता है, मध्यम वर्ग थोड़ा कम देता है, गरीब नहीं देता। और इसलिए अगर हम सभी कमोडिटीज पे एक रेट लगा दें तो जो अमीर आदमी की चीज है और गरीब आदमी की चीज है उसको एक ही टैक्स लगेगा। और फिर हम सदन के अंदर ये तर्क देखते कि ये किस प्रकार का जीएसटी है। अगर हम कम स्लैब्स वाला भी करते, अब हमने पहले कहा कि जीरो में बहुत आइटम्स आ गए, जीरो में लाने का उद्देश्य यह था कि उस पर टैक्स नहीं लगेगा, और विशेष रूप से वो आइटम्स जिसका कंजम्पशन गरीब आदमी करता है उनको या जीरो में रखा या उसको 5% में रखा। अगर हम 12 और 18 को तुरंत एक कर देते, और यह काउंसिल में डिस्कस हुआ, यह कोई केंद्र सरकार का निर्णय नहीं था, सब राज्य सरकारों का भी था, तो 9% टैक्स लगने वाले को सीधा 16 में डाल देते और 21% वाले को भी 16 में डाल देते, तो 9% वाले आइटम का एक इन्फ्लेशन इंपैक्ट होता। तो स्मूथ जीएसटी की दृष्टि से यह सोचा गया कि आरंभ में इसमें कुछ ज्यादा स्लैब रहेंगे, 0 और 5 तो हमेशा रहेगा। ज्यादा इसलिए रहेंगे कि आज का मौजूदा द प्रिंसिपल्स विच वर फॉलोड वर, नंबर 1, इट शुड बी रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल, कि जितना टैक्स आ जाता है लगभग उतने कम टैक्स नहीं होना चाहिए, सेंटर को भी और स्टेट्स को भी। दूसरा, इक्विवेलेंस। इक्विवेलेंस का अर्थ यह है कि किसी आइटम पे जो पहले टैक्स चल रहा था उसके सबसे नजदीक स्लैब में उसको डाल दो। और तीसरा, कई आइटम ऐसे हैं जो किसी वक्त हम मानते थे कि अमीर आदमी इस्तेमाल करता है, लेकिन अब वो अमीर आदमी के नहीं, वो मिडिल क्लास, लोअर मिडिल क्लास में भी चले गए, तो उनको 28% से आप नीचे लेकर आओ। जो पुरानी टैक्स व्यवस्था थी उसमें जो 2 स्टैंडर्ड रेट थे, वैट और एक्साइज का, वो 12.5% और 14.5% थे, तो मिलाकर 27 हो गए। अगर एक राज्य से दूसरे राज्य में जाता था तो 2% सीएसटी लगता था, 27 और 2 29 हो गए। और जो टैक्स के ऊपर टैक्स का कैस्केडिंग इफेक्ट होता था वो मिलाकर स्टैंडर्ड रेट 31.6% था। अब उस 31.6 को कुछ आइटम्स को 28 में ले आए, कुछ को 18 में ले आए। अब इसकी समस्या यह है कि इसलिए अगर अंत में आई डू कंसीड, मिस्टर रेड्डी रेड्स दिस क्वेश्चन, आई डू कंसीड that as it moves forward, there will be scope for rationalizing the rates. There probably will be scope that the 2 standard rates of 12 and 18 after some times could be clubbed into one. That's a fair possibility and a suggestion. But if you had done it immediately and had a single slab or lesser slabs, its inflation effect would have been much higher. And therefore, we did not get into this exercise. Now, there are several items, I addressed some of them yesterday, on which some program on television that Mr. Satpathy saw, or some news item will come, or somebody, some industry will say that I have this position. But do we know, somebody mentioned movies. Earlier, entertainment tax was being levied by the states only. What was the rate? The rate was from 20% to 110%. The entertainment tax was 20% to 110% in different states. The weighted all India average, because GST is an all India tax, the weighted all India average was 30%. Initially we put it at 28%. Then some state governments particularly, and some people in some states said, in our states for regional films, exemption used to be granted. Those state governments are still entitled to give a tax refund. In GST there is no exemption, but you can give a tax refund. Maharashtra can give a refund to a Marathi film, Gujarat can give it to a Gujarati film, Tamil Nadu can give it to a Tamil film. So we said, all right, if you feel that the council collectively took a decision that for a certain slab below 100 rupee ticket, let's make it 18. So actually there is a reduction, because the earlier tax was of a particular amount. The problem is that earlier the slabs were being mentioned, और ये जो इंप्रेशन सलीम साहब हम करते हैं पहले तो लगता नहीं था. एक कारण मैंने कल बताया था कि पहले एक्साइज एम्बेडेड होता था. दूसरा कारण एक और है, मैं बहुत आई एम वेरी रिलक्टेंटली गिविंग दैट रीजन. कुछ टैक्स न देने का भी अभ्यास था. नाउ यू गेव द एग्जांपल ऑफ इन सम स्टेट्स की व्हाट वाज द प्रॉब्लम. लेट्स से ग्रेनाइट. अब ग्रेनाइट गरीब आदमी तो इस्तेमाल नहीं करता, ग्रेनाइट का कंज्यूमर देगा. ग्रेनाइट स्लैब्स पे लगाया जाता है. द ग्रेनाइट ऑल इंडिया वेटेड एवरेज ऑफ ग्रेनाइट, वेटेड एवरेज ऑल इंडिया was 12.5 plus 14.5 plus 2 plus cascading effect 31.6. That 31.6 became 28. So what is the grievance? भाई 31.6 था, हम देते नहीं थे, अब देना पड़ेगा. इसलिए let me just come. You ask me later.
Sir, the granite is used by the rich people. But our grievance is the poor people, after the granite slabs are cut, there are some pieces. Those pieces are cut pieces are collected by the poor industry people. Just they polish it with gas. Sir, अरे ठहरो यार, गड़बड़ बात करो, गरीबों के बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ. So these pieces, what they do, just take them, put some polish on that and spray something and sell them like small tiles. Earlier, the duty on them, the tax used to be 7%. So we are telling there are about 1 lakh people who are there in Khammam districts itself. So we wanted an exemption for that only. I'm not talking about the 28%. That I agree. Rich people will have this one.
We have to see the all India weighted average. Now let me deal with 2 items for which I have read the maximum number of articles written on. It was mentioned by some members, and all of us, including me. In fact, when I went to Chennai the other day, a group of NGOs came and met me and explained to me I am having that matter investigated also. Disability aids. Now, the GST Council decided disability aids will all be at 5%. And everybody said make it 0. A senior Congress leader also wrote a letter saying make it 0. Some television channel which said it's a disability tax. But in GST, 0 is costlier than 5%. Now let me explain this and make this good. When you make any disability aid, whether it's a clutch or it's a wheelchair, what is the components of a wheelchair? There will be iron, there will be aluminium, there will be rubber, there will be a leather for the back. All the inputs are taxed at 18% or 28%. Some inputs 18% हैं या 28% हैं. In the chain, when the final product is made, it is taxed at 5%. तो 5 का मतलब ये है कि you will get, since it's an issue in Tamil Nadu, sir, I will speak in English for your convenience. Since the inputs are very high and the final rate is only 5, the manufacturer will get the input credit. So let us say his input credit is 14% or so. 5 will be subsumed in 14. He gets a refund of 9, which helps him to bring down the price of wheelchair or a clutch. If it is 0, he doesn't get input credit. So a disability aid at 0 will be costlier, at 5 will be the cheapest. But without application of mind, somebody did a program on a television channel, because in kindergarten they learned their basic arithmetic that 5 is more than 0. And therefore this whole campaign started. The people who met me in Tamil Nadu said, but actually some traders have increased it.
See, what they may feel that 5% are also exempted, that maybe they would have asked, not that the 0 thing. But
No, if you exempt 5, then you don't get input credit.
No, that is what, even getting that input credit, they want this 5% also reduced.
So,
maybe
the whole campaign started. Now let us take, there is a third objective. Sir, there is a third objective, let us decide. Do we want in India the make in India products to increase, or do we want to just allow cheap foreign products to come in? One of the objects of GST is that you must aid and assist domestic products. For that purpose, on all foreign products which are imported into India, you pay the basic custom duty, and in addition to the basic custom duty, an amount equal to GST is charged as integrated GST. So if basic custom duty is, let us say, 10%, and the IGST is 12%, then a Chinese product coming into India will have to be 22%. So it will be 22% disadvantage. And that disadvantage will help the growth of Make in India product. If you say that this 12% should be reduced to 0, then the Chinese product will get a 12% advantage. Now let us see. Some MPs also met me, I examined it. In the earlier regime with VAT and excise and all different taxes and cascading effect, the case in point typically is sanitary napkins. Now on the first side everybody says reduce the tax. The earlier rate till 30th June was 13.8%. That was a net taxation impact. Nobody made a representation because tax was embedded in the cost. It was 13.8. On an equivalence basis, the council decided 12%. They said, oh, 12%, please remove it. Because for menstrual health it is necessary and we must popularize it. What will happen to village self-help groups? Well, they are all below 20 lakhs, so they are all exempted. So no village self-help group will have to pay. Those up to 75 lakhs will have to pay only 2%.
Why did they sell in the same state?
Now you come to a large Indian manufacturer. A large Indian manufacturer is taxed at 12% minus input credit. All his inputs, synthetic, absorbents, glue, whatever material is there, are taxed at 18% and 12%. So when the Indian manufacturer gets input credit, the rate actually becomes much less. So he gets a large input credit because the inputs are costlier than the final rate. The same principle. And therefore, those made in India by village self-help groups pay nothing. Medium people will pay 2%. Large Indian producers will pay 12% minus input credit, and input is much higher, therefore most of it will be absorbed. Some minor tax will be left. But if you make it 0, the impact will be that every Indian manufacturer will close down, the Chinese product becomes 12% costlier, cheaper. And your Make in India brand doesn't survive. Because the IGST on the Chinese product itself will become nil. Therefore, sir, rather than immediately, as I said, it's a new regime. the council has a lot of experts. There are a lot of finance ministers, many of them are economists. And therefore we have the benefit of their services. And all the states decide, the state commissioners are also technical people who have learned this trade. So they are not casually fixing up these rates. So they will see the principle of equivalence. They will see the principle of revenue neutrality. They will see the principle, what is the maximum burden on a domestic consumer. They will see how Make in India brand is to be strengthened and the field not left open for foreign products to just come in by making such an inverse charge. And therefore, whenever we read in the newspaper or watch on the television, we must verify it twice before believing it to be the gospel truth. And sir, since we had a debate yesterday, I clarified. Now, Jaidev said, you raised the issue of hybrid cars. I will examine the chilies. You now raised hybrid cars. Without getting into the name of the companies, for small cars the duty was reduced. Did the company manufacturing the hybrid cars reduce the price or did it increase the price? The actual price, after you gave a massive reduction in the duty for the small car, they increased the price. And they have no explanation to give. And then they start a propaganda for the luxury hybrid, also give us a duty concession. Now for the small consumer, we gave a duty concession. Instead of reducing the price, they increased the price. And now for the luxury vehicle, the campaign is, to the luxury purchaser, please reduce the duty. Now a man who can pay 45 lakhs can also pay 50 lakhs. Because the man who had to buy it for 7 lakhs, instead of reducing the price, you increase the price. And therefore, that segment of the private sector also, before it can pressurize the GST Council, will have to see that there is some responsibility that this new regime has on them also. After all, just because electrical vehicles are better from environmental point of view, can't be converted into a regime which is so unfavorable to the consumer that the state gives up its revenues and the manufacturer increases the price. So unless they, and the number of manufacturers are not too many, and therefore the council is watching that situation. As I have said, they are watching and their experts keep meeting regularly. Every state is getting grievances. I can only tell this House that every member of the council, every finance minister of the state is neither being pressurized by a demonstration nor by only some domestic concerns. When they sit collectively, they look at the data, they look at what is in the interest of the consumer and the country, what was the earlier rate, what is the revenue neutral rate, and how can the Make in India brand be strengthened, and then correspondingly take a decision. And I'm sure we'll continue to meet regularly and continue that exercise. With these few words, sir, I commend this bill for approval.